In the gloomy recesses of a fog-bound London, there existed a tale scarcely whispered on the lips of its denizens. A tale of a delicate girl, Miss Arabella Fenwick, whose very nature was touched by an unseen malady that defied the understanding of even the most learned men. Arabella, a child of modest station yet possessing a rare inner grace and sensitivity, had been brought up under the stern watch of her austere guardian, Mr. Fenwick, whose reputation for integrity was matched only by his unyielding adherence to societal convention. It was on a damp autumn evening, as twilight pressed its somber hues upon the ancient cobblestones, that the first signs of her inexplicable transformation began to emerge. It started with a silent, unnerving shift in her eyes, a deep and distant glimmer that spoke of secrets untold. Friends and neighbors observed her gaze lingering upon the darkened corners of the drawing room, as though a spectral audience were present, unseen by mortal eyes. In the small household where each room seemed steeped in the melancholy of bygone eras, whispers circulated of a presence that seemed to be gradually entrenching itself in Arabella's soul. At first, her behavior was as delicate as a whisper in the wind. In conversation, her speech would occasionally take a turn toward the archaic, her words woven with a strange eloquence that none had ever known her to possess. Those who listened in quiet admiration could not help but sense that some other entity, an ancient and unfathomable force, was guiding her tongue. Yet there was no evidence of physical distress. Rather, it was as though her mind had become a conduit for an experience that transcended mortal understanding. Mr. Fenwick, though a man of rigid propriety, found himself perplexed and troubled by the gradual change in his ward. A man of science in an age where the rational was held aloft as the only beacon against superstition, he nonetheless could not shake the feeling that there was something far more insidious at work. Late into the night, when the gas lights flickered and the silence of the manor was punctuated only by the distant tolling of a bell, he would pace the creaking floors, haunted by the notion that his dear Arabella was being visited by forces beyond human ken. The transformation advanced with a slow and deliberate precision. Arabella's sleep became a restless affair, filled with murmurs that sounded not unlike a prayer in an archaic tongue, a cadence that resonated with the echoes of an ancient lament. In these fitful hours, she would thrash and turn, as if caught in the grip of unseen hands, and though her body bore no marks of physical torment, her soul appeared to be engaged in a silent battle with an encroaching darkness. Some nights, as the moon cast eerie shadows upon her pale face, a smile, a disturbing, unsettling curl of the lips, would pass over her features, a smile that belied the terror lurking behind her unseeing eyes. As the days turned into weeks, the household began to feel the weight of an intangible dread. Servants whispered of footsteps in the corridors where none should be, of strange voices uttering cryptic phrases that defied explanation. Yet none dared speak openly of the events that seemed to coalesce around Arabella, for fear of drawing upon themselves the very curse that now appeared to have taken root within her. The local physician, a man schooled in the emerging sciences of the day, was summoned in desperation, but his rational explanations could not dispel the mounting evidence of a malevolent influence. His inquiries led him to ancient manuscripts and obscure texts on the metaphysical, and even as he sought to explain the phenomenon as a delusion or a nervous breakdown, there lingered an undeniable sense of otherworldly intrusion. In the midst of this growing unease, Arabella's interactions with those around her became ever more fraught with an undercurrent of terror. when she spoke to visitors, her tone would shift suddenly from one of gentle courtesy to one that hinted at a knowledge far too vast and terrible for a girl of her tender years. Her conversations, though measured and precise, contained fragments of warnings and admonitions that left her interlocutors with a chill that outlasted the visit. It was as if she were relaying messages not of her own devising, but those dictated by a presence that had seized control of her innermost thoughts. It was during one such encounter, on a rain-laden afternoon in early winter, that the true nature of the entity within her began to reveal itself. A visiting scholar, known for his expertise in the occult and the mystic traditions of ancient lore, found himself drawn into conversation with Arabella in the library of the Fenwick household. As he listened, a profound disquiet grew within him. The girl's voice, usually soft and yielding, adopted a cadence that was at once both foreign and compelling. In her measured tones were contained suggestions of a realm beyond the mortal plane, a realm of shadows and despair, where no light could penetrate. The scholar, though deeply learned, felt his own rational faculties begin to crumble in the face of her words. Each utterance seemed to peel back another layer of the mundane world, exposing a raw and terrible truth about the nature of existence. In the depth of her eyes, he saw reflected the swirling chaos of the unknown, and he could not help but feel that Arabella herself was but a vessel, a fragile shell inhabited by a demon of unspeakable antiquity. Yet even as the scholar sought to warn Mr. Fenwick of his growing conviction, the elder man remained divided, torn between the demands of reason and the insistence of his maternal duty. In the ensuing weeks, the possession took on a more pronounced and deliberate form. Arabella began to exhibit abilities that defied the natural order. Her hands would move with a precision and purpose that seemed guided by an unseen hand, and her dreams, when she spoke of them, were filled with vivid imagery of a realm where time and space held no sway. There were moments in the quiet hours of the night when she would stand motionless in the midst of the drawing room, her eyes fixated on a point beyond mortal sight, as if she were communing with entities that dwelled in the very fabric of existence. The psychological torment that ensued was as profound as it was subtle. Arabella, for all her delicate beauty and refined manner, was now caught in a ceaseless struggle for control of her own mind. At times she would exhibit sudden bursts of lucidity, a brief, desperate plea for deliverance from the entity that sought to claim her soul. In these fleeting moments, her eyes shone with the unmistakable light of a girl tormented by forces beyond her control, and those who witnessed her despair felt an inexplicable urge to reach out and save her from the encroaching abyss. Yet as quickly as these moments came, they were swallowed by an overwhelming tide of darkness, leaving her once more in a state of impenetrable silence and eerie composure. The household, once a haven of genteel routine, was transformed into a theater of the macabre, where each creaking floorboard and rustling curtain played a part in the unfolding drama of terror. The servants, once hearty and lively, now moved about with downcast eyes and hushed voices, fearful of inciting the wrath of the unseen force that now haunted every corner of the estate. Even Mr. Fenwick, whose stoicism had long been his defining trait, found himself beset by nightmares and disquieting premonitions that made each day an ordeal of quiet, suffocating dread. As winter gave way to the bleak promise of an early spring, it became evident that Arabella's fate was inexorably tied to the sinister presence within her. The scholar, who had once been her confidant, now regarded her with a mixture of pity and horror. He had come to understand that the demon that had possessed her was not a mere spectral aberration or the product of an overactive imagination, but a being of profound malice and ancient origin, a force that thrived on the fragility of the human mind. In his final report to Mr. Fenwick, written with trembling hand and ink that seemed to bleed with despair, he described Arabella as a living paradox, a soul simultaneously ensnared in the tender confines of youth and dragged inexorably into the abyss of eldritch horror. In a final desperate attempt to reclaim what remained of his beloved ward, Mr. Fenwick sought the aid of a reclusive mystic reputed to possess the wisdom of forgotten ages. The mystic, a gaunt and somber figure cloaked in the melancholy of many years, arrived at the estate with little more than cryptic murmurs and ancient relics. In the stillness of the candlelit parlor, he undertook a solemn rite, invoking names and powers that resonated with the deep, primordial fabric of existence. For hours they toiled in a fragile dance of hope and despair, as the mystic's incantations wove a tenuous barrier against the dark influence that had so thoroughly claimed Arabella. Yet even as the mystic reached the climax of his arcane efforts, a final shuddering cry tore from Arabella's throat, a cry that was at once both human and utterly inhuman. In that moment, it became painfully clear that the demon had not been vanquished, but merely driven into a deeper, more secret recess of her soul, where it would remain, waiting with a patient malevolence. The mystic's face, drawn with the lines of long-forgotten sorrow, betrayed the understanding that no man could truly exercise such a force, that some shadows, once invited in, would never relinquish their hold. In the years that followed, the memory of Miss Arabella Fenwick became a subject of hushed speculation and melancholy lamentation. The Fenwick estate, once a symbol of genteel refinement, gradually fell into disrepair. Its once bright halls now a refuge for sorrow and specters. Mr. Fenwick himself, haunted by the irrevocable loss of the girl he had so cherished, wandered the desolate corridors of his mind, tormented by the echoes of a past that refused to fade. And Arabella, that once innocent soul, now irrevocably entwined with the demonic, faded into the shadows of history. A tragic reminder that the mind, when besieged by the incomprehensible, can become both a prison and a gateway to realms best left undisturbed. In the final reckoning, it was not the physical world that claimed her, but the boundless, inescapable realm of her own inner torment. A dark legacy that whispered still through the empty corridors of time. The world, in its relentless march towards modernity, forgot the tragic girl and her monstrous fate. Yet her presence lingered like a silent curse upon the collective consciousness of those who dared to peer into the darkness. And in that endless twilight of human reason, one truth remained irrefutably clear. Sometimes, the most harrowing horrors reside not in the world without, but in the quiet, uncharted depths of the soul. In that final, unyielding darkness, hope itself was condemned to eternal silence.